A missing teenager, gone for more than a year. A Tesla registered to one of music's fastest rising stars. And on September 8, 2025, those two stories collided in a way no one could have imagined. Inside the front trunk of that car were the remains of 15-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. The car belonged to singer David Burke. From that moment, the investigation captured headlines across the country. Vigils were held in Celeste's hometown, while fans of the young artist were left stunned as his name appeared in connection to the case. For Celeste's family, the painful search for answers that had stretched across more than a year suddenly turned into a fight for justice. How did a missing teenager from Lake Elsinore end up inside a car discovered in the Hollywood Hills? Who had access to that vehicle? And what unanswered questions still surround the life of a rising star now tied to this story? Her name was Celeste Rivas Hernandez. Just 15 years old, from Lake Elsinore, California. She was reported missing in April of 2024, after failing to return home. For her family, the weeks turned into months, each new day filled with unanswered questions, searches, and the painful uncertainty of not knowing where she had gone. Flyers appeared in her community, appeals went out through local news, but the trail grew cold. And then, more than a year later, her story would cross paths with someone no one expected, 20-year-old singer David Burke. In just a few short years, his music had gone from viral hits recorded in his bedroom to sold-out shows and brand collaborations. His fan base stretched across continents, his songs were streamed millions of times. On the surface, their worlds could not have been more different, a teenager from Riverside County and an artist rising quickly through the music industry. But the places connected to them tell a different story. Celeste's last known days were tied to the quiet streets of Lake Elsinore, while the Tesla linked to her discovery was towed from the Hollywood Hills, a neighborhood known for its luxury homes and celebrity residence. Two settings almost 100 miles apart, now bound together by one chilling discovery. That overlap, a missing teenager's remains inside the car of a rising star, is what makes this case unlike any other. And as investigators began piecing together the timeline, the questions only grew more urgent. Because if Celeste disappeared in 2024, how did she end up in a Tesla impounded in 2025? Who had access to that vehicle in the time between? And what connection, if any, truly exists between the girl who vanished and the artist whose name is now linked to her case? Uncovering the timeline behind these two lives has only led to more questions. In April of 2024, 15-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez was last seen in Lake Elsinore, California. At first, her absence didn't raise immediate alarms. There had been reports in the past of Celeste leaving home, only to return after a short time. But this time was different. Days passed, and then weeks, with no word from her. Her family reached out publicly, pleading for her safe return. Local police joined the search, treating her case with growing urgency as each lead went cold. Flyers with her photograph were taped to storefronts, pinned to community boards, and shared across social media. In Lake Elsinore, a town where faces are familiar and neighbors know one another, Celeste's disappearance weighed heavily. The community rallied, but hope began to strain under the silence. Each tip that came in, each phone call that suggested a possible sighting, led investigators back to the same place, uncertainty. And then came the question that haunted both her family and authorities: was this another instance of her running away, or was something more serious at play? The difference was critical, and time was slipping away. Because with every passing day, the chances of tracing her steps grew slimmer. Where did Celeste go after she was last seen? Who was she with? And why, this time, did she never come home? That silence, stretching on for more than a year, became its own kind of evidence. And when answers finally surfaced, they weren't in Lake Elsinore at all. They were tied to a car, nearly 100 miles away, sitting quietly in the Hollywood Hills. While Celeste's family searched desperately for answers in 2024, another story was unfolding on a very different stage. That same year, a young artist named David Burke was experiencing a meteoric rise in the music world. He had first broken through in 2022, recording tracks from his bedroom that spread quickly across TikTok and streaming platforms. His sound, moody, emotional, and raw, resonated with millions of young listeners. By 2023 and 2024, his songs were climbing charts, landing him on major tours, and catching the attention of global brands. With his growing fan base came a carefully crafted public image, a teenager turned star almost overnight, celebrated as one of music's most promising new voices. For his fans, he represented creativity, youth, and possibility. His lyrics about heartbreak and isolation seemed to speak directly to their own experiences. But by late 2025, when Celeste's remains were found, that same image collided with a reality few could have imagined. Suddenly, the headlines weren't about music streams or viral moments. They were about a Tesla, registered in his name, that now formed the center of a police investigation. It is important to note, as of now, David Burke has not been charged with any crime. Authorities have confirmed only that the car belonged to him and that his residence in the Hollywood Hills was searched as part of the inquiry. His representatives say he is cooperating fully with investigators. Still, the contrast was jarring. A rising star, adored by millions, suddenly linked to a case involving a missing teenager found in his vehicle. The public was left asking, how could these two worlds ever have crossed? And more unsettling, what might investigators uncover next? In the weeks leading up to September 2025, a white Tesla sat parked on a quiet Hollywood Hills street. Neighbors noticed the car had Texas plates, unusual in an area where most vehicles carried California tags. Some recalled it sitting slightly askew, parked for days without moving, as if it had been forgotten. Eventually, the Tesla was towed. On paper, it seemed routine, an abandoned vehicle, impounded like so many others. But its registration carried a name that was anything but ordinary, David Burke, the chart-topping artist known as D4vd. At the time, few could have imagined that this detail would later tie into a missing person case more than a year old. For weeks, the car sat quietly in the tow yard, blending in among rows of other impounded vehicles. Its story, and its contents, remained sealed away. And then came September 8, 2025. Impound staff inspecting the car alerted police to something unusual in the front trunk. Inside, investigators made a discovery that would shock the community of Lake Elsinore and ignite headlines nationwide: the remains of 15-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. The link between Celeste's disappearance in April 2024 and this Tesla was almost impossible to comprehend. How had her journey, a teenager from Riverside County, ended inside a car registered to a rising music star in the Hollywood Hills? The discovery raised more questions than it answered. How long had the Tesla been parked before it was towed? Who had last driven it? And why, after over a year of searching, did Celeste's story surface here, in this way? As police traced the vehicle's movements, a chilling timeline began to form. But with every new piece of information, the central mystery only deepened, leaving investigators and the public to wonder what hidden chapters of this story still remain untold. When officers opened the front trunk of the impounded Tesla on September 8, 2025, what they found ended any chance of routine procedure. Inside were human remains, fragile, concealed, and immediately raising the stakes of what had first appeared to be an abandoned vehicle case. The next step was identification. Detectives noted a small tattoo, along with physical characteristics that suggested the remains could belong to a missing person. Within hours, comparisons were drawn to open files in Riverside County, one of which had haunted investigators for over a year, the case of 15-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez, reported missing in April 2024. But confirmation would take time. Forensic teams worked through the night, carefully transporting the remains to the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office. There, experts began the painstaking process of matching evidence. Physical descriptions, personal identifiers, and eventually, DNA. Days later, the results came back. The remains were officially confirmed to be Celeste. For her family in Lake Elsinore, the news was devastating. After more than a year of unanswered questions, the hope that she might still return alive was extinguished in a single report. What remained unclear, however, was just as haunting. The cause of death had not yet been determined. The autopsy was pending, and until those findings were released, the timeline of Celeste's final moments remained in shadow. The confirmation triggered immediate reactions, from her community, from the media, and from those who now questioned how her story had intersected with a vehicle registered to one of music's fastest rising artists. The discovery resolved one mystery, where Celeste was. But it opened an even larger one, how she ended up there. And until the autopsy answered even the most basic questions, the case was frozen in uncertainty, with far more questions than answers. The discovery inside the Tesla set off a chain reaction within law enforcement. Within hours, the Los Angeles Police Department's Robbery Homicide Division, the same unit that handles some of the city's most complex and high-profile cases, took over the investigation. Their first move was to follow the paper trail. The Tesla was registered to David Burke. That detail alone was enough to shift the case from a local discovery to a matter of national attention. Investigators secured a search warrant for a Hollywood Hills residence tied to the singer. Neighbors watched as unmarked vehicles rolled up the steep streets that evening. Detectives moved quickly, carrying out boxes, computers, and other items, standard procedure in an investigation now centered on tracing digital footprints and potential connections. Inside the residence, electronic devices were collected. Every phone, hard drive, and laptop could hold critical clues, messages, location data, and even deleted files that might reveal where the Tesla had been and who had last used it. Representatives for David Burke released a statement confirming he was cooperating fully with authorities. They stressed that he had not been charged with any crime and that the investigation was ongoing. But as the search played out, new questions rippled through both the industry and the public. Was this simply an unfortunate coincidence, a missing girl's body discovered in a car tied by registration to a celebrity? Or could the electronic trail now in police hands uncover something far more complicated? For now, investigators have not revealed what, if anything, was found during the search. But each seized device and collected item became another piece of a puzzle that was only beginning to take shape. And with every unanswered question, the tension grew, because the Tesla had already told part of the story. What remained hidden in the digital evidence might tell the rest. The confirmation of Celeste Rivas Hernandez's identity sent shockwaves far beyond the impound lot. In Lake Elsinore, her community, which had searched, prayed, and waited for more than a year, now gathered in grief. Candlelight vigils were held, with classmates, neighbors, and loved ones standing together in silence. For them, the discovery was both an answer and a heartbreak. They finally knew what had happened to Celeste, but not how or why. At the same time, the spotlight turned to David Burke. Within days, the impact on his career was undeniable. Scheduled performances were cancelled. Brand partnerships that once highlighted his fast ascent were paused or quietly suspended. The very name that had headlined festival stages was now appearing in headlines of a very different kind. On social media, the story spread at lightning speed. Fans, critics, and strangers alike began dissecting every detail, old lyrics, past interviews, and even images of the Tesla itself. Screenshots, rumors, and theories flooded timelines. Yet despite the noise, investigators made one point clear: much of what circulated online remained unverified, and at times, misleading. The contrast was stark. On one side, a grieving family and a mourning community, their focus entirely on the life of a 15-year-old cut short. On the other, an artist whose career trajectory was now overshadowed by an investigation he had not been charged in but could not escape. The public was left suspended between fact and speculation. How had Celeste ended up in that Tesla? What, if any, connection existed beyond the registration? And with every cancelled concert and every unanswered question, the case drew more eyes, not only from fans, but from a world waiting to see where the evidence would lead. The vigil flames in Lake Elsinore eventually burned out each night, but the questions they represented did not. And with the investigation still unfolding, one thing became certain: this story is far from over. With Celeste's identity confirmed, the investigation entered its most delicate phase. At the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office, specialists began the difficult task of determining both the cause and manner of her death. Until those findings were finalized, even the most basic questions, when and how she died, remained unanswered. Meanwhile, forensic teams turned their attention to the Hollywood Hills residence tied to David Burke. The computers, phones, and hard drives seized under warrant were sent to digital analysts. Every message, deleted file, and trace of location data could potentially place individuals with the Tesla at key points in time. Investigators also canvassed the neighborhood where the Tesla had first been spotted. Residents described seeing the car sitting unattended, with its Texas plate standing out among rows of California tags. Detectives took statements, attempting to build a timeline of when the vehicle appeared and, more importantly, who might have been behind the wheel. In the lab, physical evidence from the car itself was examined. Fibers, fingerprints, and possible trace materials were collected. Even the smallest sample could help narrow down who had access to the Tesla in the months it sat abandoned. Yet for every lead, another question surfaced. If the Tesla had been parked for weeks before being towed, had anyone else looked inside? Could the timeline stretch back even further? To the period shortly after Celeste vanished in April 2024. And how had the vehicle moved from her hometown in Riverside County to a quiet street in the Hollywood Hills? Police have not disclosed their findings from the seized electronics or forensic analysis. But the very fact that those examinations were underway suggested that answers might lie not in witness accounts, but in hidden data, numbers, timestamps, and signals invisible to the naked eye. For now, each test result, each interview, and each file recovered from a device added another fragment to a puzzle. But until those pieces could be assembled, the mystery of Celeste's final journey remained as unsolved as the day she disappeared. Here is what we know for certain. 15-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez was reported missing in April of 2024. For more than a year, her case remained open, her whereabouts unknown. On September 8, 2025, her remains were discovered in the front trunk of a Tesla impounded in Los Angeles. That Tesla was registered to the rising artist David Burke. In the days that followed, investigators executed a search warrant at a Hollywood Hills home tied to him. Computers and electronic devices were seized for forensic review. His representatives have confirmed that he is cooperating fully with law enforcement. Importantly, as of this point in the investigation, no charges have been filed against him. These are the facts, and beyond them, the rest is still uncertain. What remains unanswered are the questions that keep this case suspended in mystery. Investigators have not yet determined how Celeste died or precisely when. The circumstances of how her remains were placed in the Tesla also remain unclear. Who else, if anyone, had access to the vehicle in the weeks or months it sat abandoned? And perhaps most haunting of all, was there any direct connection between Celeste and the artist whose name is now tied to the car? For now, these questions remain open, and until the evidence speaks, the case continues to raise more shadows than clarity. With so few answers, speculation has filled the gaps. But it is critical to note, these are theories only, not confirmed by investigators. One theory suggests there may have been a personal relationship between Celeste and the artist. While some media reports hint at this, no official confirmation exists. Another theory points to third-party involvement. Because the Tesla sat abandoned and was later towed, some believe others could have accessed or used the car without the owner's knowledge. And a third theory, circulating largely online, highlights disturbing parallels between elements of David Burke's past music videos and the circumstances of Celeste's discovery. Fans have drawn their own connections, but authorities have made no official link. For now, all of these remain unproven. Only investigators can determine what is fact and what is speculation. Until then, every rumor and theory remains just that. A possibility, not the truth. On September 23, 2025, Celeste's remains were released to her family, allowing them to begin the painful process of mourning. The official autopsy results are still pending. Without them, the precise cause and manner of death remain unknown. As of this outline, no arrests have been made, and no charges have been filed. The investigation is ongoing, with law enforcement urging patience as forensic results and digital evidence are analyzed. For Celeste's family, for her community, and for the millions now following this case, the next steps lie in the hands of investigators, and the answers they uncover. Celeste Rivas Hernandez was just 15 years old. Her family and her community deserve answers, and investigators continue their search for them. For now, the central questions remain. How did she end up in that car? And who is responsible? What do you think explains this case? Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments below. If you want to follow every development in this unfolding investigation, be sure to subscribe and stay with us as we continue to track new information. Because one thing is clear, this story is far from finished.